think I'm wrong? Then prove me wrong.
My pleasure.
Dear Austin, hi,
It's me, Ed, a programmer with a background in physics.
and from one self-proclaimed scientist to another, I have a bone to pick with you regarding several of your statements in your Getting Over It video. In short, the calculations you demonstrated make no goddamn sense. Now, firstly, I certainly won't discredit your ultimate point, that Vin Diesel's hammer is actually a counterproductive tool in getting over it. That said, let me meticulously point out, point by point, the points at which your physics is off point. Get the point?
But what if, say, you were going to move the fulcrum over to the right until it were, say, 1 meter away from the 100 kilo person and 2 meters away from the 50 kilo person? The opposite would happen.
Poor choice of an example, I must say. The opposite would happen if the 50 kilo weight were, say, 3 meters away. That is, 3 times as far from the fulcrum as the 100 kilo weight. But in the scenario you described, the opposite would not happen. In fact, nothing would happen. The lever is now balanced, or, as physicists say, in equilibrium.
Now, many people, when trying to describe why levers work, make this huge mistake of making it sound like the reason levers work is because the force of the lever is transferred across the longer section of the lever, which is why somehow it works. But that's not it.
Actually, it is.
But before I get into that, I'd like to point out this other inaccuracy.
It's actually the distance the objects move at the very ends of the lever that makes a difference.
The ends of the lever have nothing to do with it. It's the positions of the loads on the lever, regardless of how close they are to the ends. But I digress. Now, credit where credit is due, what you said about using the same amount of energy is correct.
In order to move an object, you must always use the same amount of energy, which is force times distance.
However, that is only applicable when it comes to moving an object or objects. In your previous example with the 50 and 100 kilo loads, which, as previously stated, should result in equilibrium, there is no motion, so there must be something else at play. And therein lies the actual way that levers work. And speaking of work, we can toss that concept out entirely as it has no purpose in this discussion. Instead, let me introduce torque, which is like the rotational analog of force. Much as an unbalanced force causes an acceleration in some direction, an unbalanced torque causes a rotational acceleration. There are a number of equations involving torque, but the one we're interested in here is this: force times distance. Now Ed, I hear you saying, I thought force times distance is energy, like Austin said. Well, actually, it's work, not energy, but close enough. And yes, force times the distance in the direction in which the force is applied is work. However, force times the distance perpendicular to the direction of the force is torque. And going back to your own diagram, see that that's exactly what we have here. An unbalanced torque causes a rotational acceleration, that is, causes a body's rotation, say that of our lever, to change. So yes, by adjusting the distances from the fulcrum, even while maintaining the same load forces, we can cause the torques to balance or unbalance in whichever direction we favor. The next point of yours that hit me like a ton of bricks, although inconsequential to your video, was your measurement conversions.
2.5 meters per second with an acceleration of 11.55 meters per second squared, or 5.5 miles per hour and 25.8 miles per hour squared, respectively.
11.55 meters per second squared is actually about 93,000 miles per hour squared, not 25.8. Slight difference there. Don't believe me, just watch. Again, that doesn't come into play in your subsequent calculations at all, but it does serve to throw into question your credibility. What does mess up your subsequent calculations, however, is the forces you report in your water bottle experiment.
The 735 grams of the water bottle in the wrench, that, under the Earth's gravity, is 0.735 newtons.
Oh, really? Our good pal Isaac Newton told us in his second law that force is mass times acceleration. If the mass of the water bottle is 735 grams, or 0.735 kilograms, and the Earth's gravitational acceleration is accepted to be 9.81 meters per second squared, then the resulting force is, let me punch it into my calculator here, 7.21 newtons, almost 10 times as much as you report, 9.81 times to be precise. That makes your 612% figure a little bit less impressive, whereas it should have been more like 62%.
Yeah, so that would mean that the lever actually did allow you to lift the bottle with only 62% of the force.
So, somewhere along the way, I think something went wrong. The same miscalculation, or perhaps I should say the exact opposite, happened when you converted the other way. According to that same formula Newton gave us earlier, 8.49 newtons would be about 0.865 kilograms, or about 2 pounds, and you don't want to disagree with Newton about newtons. With that in mind, it's plain to see that your calculations to lift your 68 kilogram self is probably also flawed, but I can't correct them with absolute certainty as I can only speculate how you obtained your original lever measurements. Now, as I said at the beginning, I will grant you your ultimate conclusion. However, don't get too comfortable in your short-lived fidelity. Mere moments later, you declare yet another fallacy.
This isn't a lever, it's an anti-lever.
As a matter of fact, this is a lever. You even showed such a lever in your original introduction of levers. It's not an efficient use of a lever for this particular application, no, but it is, in fact, a third-class lever. So, although I appreciate your dedication to physical accuracy in fictional media, unfortunately I can't say that you demonstrate the same dedication to physical accuracy in your analyses. Check your work, noob! Sincerely, Ed.